Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and I am so excited today to have Chris Wong on the podcast. He is a licensed therapist, executive coach, and the host of the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, a podcast for people who want to lead with more clarity, confidence, and courage, especially when the stakes are high and the room gets quiet. And I would highly encourage you to listen to this podcast. I've listened to a few episodes and have gotten so many insights. A little bit more about Chris. He has over a decade and a half of experience in nonprofit and health sectors, specializing in helping purpose-driven leaders navigate messy transitions, fix dysfunctional teams, and lead culture change that actually sticks. He worked as a therapist, built leadership programs from scratch, and coached hundreds of leaders who were brought in to turn things around under pressure. Whether he's breaking down a hard conversation or interviewing a nonprofit CEO about board dynamics, he brings a refreshing mix of emotional intelligence, strategic insight, and just enough sarcasm to keep it real. His goal? To help leaders master the inevitable hard conversations. Well, I love this topic. So welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully I live up to that intro.
I know it's always fun to hear your intro back to you. So I would love to know more about your background. You said that you started as a therapist. Is this something that you always knew that you wanted to be? Tell us a little bit more about what led you to this path.
Well, no, I didn't always want to be a therapist. I wanted to be a doctor. I just couldn't get into medical school, but I loved psychology. So I went into working with adolescents and teenagers, which is what I love, working with that population. And I love that work, working with developmental trauma, deep trauma, but I just got burned out. And so I was looking for what was next. And so I moved into learning and development because I still love being able to support others through that transformation and growth and learning new skills and all that. And that led me to working on leadership and organizational development because I was thinking, I think one of the things that all learning and development professional, the question we're all haunted by is, how do we make the information stick beyond the training session? And for me, I was realizing it's the leaders because they're the ones that set the culture. They're the ones that set processes, and they can do more coaching and guidance and mentorship on a daily basis than I can as a facilitator. And so I started doing that. And I love that work, seeing again, that brought in that one-to-one work again, that I was doing as a therapist that I wasn't able to get anymore, but still seeing that growth. And leaders I found were they're always much more invested in what's happening and they're ready to try new things. And so they're happy to do it. And so it was a great move into that space. And so I've been on my own for about 2 years because I got laid off from my previous place after reorganization. But yeah, I've been doing this on my own for the past 2 years. And I love having this big impact working with nonprofits and other purpose-driven leaders to do good things and lead good teams.
So when it comes to leadership, what are some of the challenges that you see nonprofit leaders facing?
Well, I think there's always the scarcity mindset that's always hard in the nonprofit space. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough people. We never have enough. We should get paid more. And I'll say that I've worked across industries. I've never met another company or team that felt like they had enough resources. And it's all relative, right? Even if you're like $100 million company, you technically have more resources than a nonprofit that's like 500,000 in revenue. But you still have the same feeling of, I want to do more. I want to get more out of people. And people are the same regardless, right? It's all about how do you align people? How do you motivate people? And that's the hard thing that leaders are running into is how do you motivate people to work and to do what needs to be done and align them with the mission. And I think also as they're facing this newer generation, they're recognizing that this newer generation isn't afraid to question all these assumptions that we have about work. And so all those unwritten rules now have to be written down, have to be really explicit and clear about why do we do things the way we do them. And so that's a big insight point or a big reflection point for a lot of leaders that I've noticed now is what do we need to do? What's necessary? And what is something I like the way everybody else do it this way? What's nice to have versus what's need to have? And that's a real important point when we're thinking about the work and thinking about leadership. It's not about the way you do it. It's about how do you achieve your mission with your people.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point because sometimes we're like, not everyone operates the same way as we do, right? And we're like, you have to do it this way. But it's like, do you really have to do it that way? Or is it just because you want them to do it that way? Like that difference between need and maybe this is just how I want it to be. And you mentioned something about generational differences. And this conversation comes up a lot when I'm attending conferences or trainings. And I was in a conference back in February and I was in a marketing session. And they were talking about videos and TikTok and things like that, and how the older generation doesn't understand TikTok or like why you need to be on social media all the time. I didn't have social media till I was in college. Like I didn't grow up with it. And they were like, well, how do we like have these conversations between different generations to I think we often focus on our differences and like how far apart we are instead of finding those commonalities and how we can have a productive conversation rather than being like, I'm right, you're wrong. There's no agreement here. So how do you navigate those conversations between the generational differences? Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more.
I think it is finding that common ground. And I think I think it's helping everybody understand intent versus impact. And the reality that impact is still important, right? If it's offensive, it's still offensive. And it doesn't matter if I intend to be good, it's still offensive and we need to apologize for it. And there's also an understanding of this is how I view the world. It's no different than just thinking about any cultural humility trainings or DEI trainings. It's a lot of that is how do you understand somebody else's perspective and point of view and bring that into your own work. And I think that's the same thing is everybody still has the same needs, right? They still want to be seen, be heard, but be understood. They want to be respected. They want their ideas to matter. They want to do good work, right? And that may look different to everybody in generations, but people want to do a good job. They don't want to come in and like mess up your company or mess up your team on purpose, right? Most of the time. But it's really about finding those common grounds and realizing it may look different now, right? The terminology is different, the slang's different, the words are different, but we're all still looking for the same thing in community. So all of those, finding that similarity and starting with that, I think that's always the helpful part is where are we aligned, where our values match up, and then what does that look like to us? Helping them understand that it looks different to everybody else, and how do we find that common ground of what's supposed to look like together?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And you've worked with leaders in some of the toughest moments of their careers when the stakes are high and the pressure is on. In your experience, what makes a conversation truly difficult, and why do so many leaders avoid them?
It comes down to we care about the relationship and the outcome, meaning we want to preserve that relationship in some way. Not that we want to be best friends, but we want to have a good working relationship. And we care about the outcome. We're trying to get a specific outcome that's important to us in some way. And so when you want both, it's hard because if you didn't care about the relationship and you only cared about the outcome, you could just say whatever you need to say. You're like, oh, we just need to do this. It doesn't matter. Whereas, and vice versa, if you care about the relationship, but you don't really care about the income, the outcome, then you could just compromise. You could say, okay, we'll just do it your way. It doesn't matter to me. I just want us to work well together. There, when that disconnect happens, then there's an issue and you try to preserve both at the same time. And then also that fight, flight, or freeze response we all have. It all comes down to we're feeling a threat. We're feeling we're going to be in danger. And so we're either going to be yelling or arguing or trying to end the conversation or run away or freeze up and not say anything at all. And the thing we don't realize is the other person feels the exact same way. And so they are also in that fight, flight, or freeze response. And if you can get them out of that response, then they can be rational and think about it and talk about it with you. But until that happens, they're still just reacting from a place of emotional reactivity and they're still just in defense mode. And you won't be able to get anywhere without that.
Yeah, I am trained in this process called EMC leadership. Dr. Lila Gershfeld is going to be one of the speakers at my summit, which we'll talk about. And she's also been on the podcast. And it was funny because I was sharing this on a podcast and someone was like, Haley, do we have to talk about like our childhood and like our inner child when it comes to conflict? But I was like, yeah, because some of those, the way we react in certain situations are from learned experiences from our past. So can you talk a little bit more about how that manifests, or does that come into play when we crave connection, right? And then we reach for it in ways that we were taught or ways that learned how to reach for that connection. And so whether that's positive or negative, right? So can you talk a little bit more about the psychology behind that?
Yeah, I describe it as if you want to think about a path in snow, like if you walk through snow, like a path that everybody's walked through, it's packed down, it's easy, and it's easy to walk through. And then if you wanted to get off that trail, it takes a lot more effort, right? Especially if there's deep snow. Our brains are exactly the same way, is because we've learned a way of responding in hard situations or reacting in hard situations that we automatically default to that right away. And that comes up a lot of different ways, whether I think conflict is bad, nobody should be raising their voices, or I should always defer to the other person. I can't push back, I guess, especially if they're in a position of authority. I'm not supposed to push back. Or if I always see I've done nothing wrong, I always see the other person as the problem. They just need to change their behavior, change the way they're viewing things because I'm doing the right thing. Whatever that has happened and the way we were raised, that influences, and then we always default to that. So one example I give is my mom was in a refugee camp because she came out of the Vietnam War. She was a refugee. And so she was there for a year or two, and it's a very dangerous environment. It's very difficult. You're in that fight, flight, or freeze response almost every day. And so now she's approaching her 60s, 70s. And so she still has that same response whenever something changes, whenever there's a new situation. She feels like there's a threat, and she feels like lots of people are not to be trusted outside of like family and friends that she's made. And it's hard for her to get to trust people because of that experience of I can't trust people. I don't know who is on my side and who's not, because there's so much danger out there, rightfully so, because of her experiences. Likewise, if I was taught to never argue, I always have to just listen to whatever somebody in authority says. It's going to be very hard for me to then manage up and speak up against a supervisor or manager or say something that I disagree with in a meeting, is because I was always taught, don't push back, don't be rocking the boat, always just agree with what the person in authority says to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that perspective and sharing the story about your mom. And while this isn't necessarily related, I think on the lens of not trusting people, I've experienced a lot of distrust in the nonprofit sector, whether that's through donors trusting nonprofits or internally, because as we know, there is a lot of turnover in the nonprofit sector. And specifically, I've been in roles where I'm hired and the rest of the team is hesitant to build a relationship with me because they just expect me to leave a year later. And so it's really hard to reach for that connection and reach for those relationships and get close to someone when you feel like, oh, well, everyone always leaves anyways, right?
Yeah.
So how do we start to build that trust within the nonprofit sector? So because not being able to work together, we need each other, hurts the mission in the way that we're able to be efficient within our roles and within our teams and bridge those gaps. So can you talk a little bit more about building trust within an organization?
Yeah. And that's such a big question, because you're also asking a philosophical question about society trusting the work of nonprofits. But also, I think you're right. We call it a closed group versus an open group. So if you have a closed group, it means that everybody comes in at the same time and stays in that group for whatever amount of time, and then they leave together. In those kind of systems, it's a lot easier to create trust and faster because nothing's changing. You're in the same people. You can go through all those stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, things like that. When you have an open group, which means that anybody can come and go whenever they want to, it's a lot harder to create those bonds, because you're right. People get tired of having to restart from scratch, of learning who you are. I have to start from scratch of opening, who I am, and being vulnerable. We have to share. And maybe I spent so much time with this person that I'm just tired. I don't want to start from scratch over and over again. So it's a lot harder. And I think that's partially what sort of culture and norms is leadership creating within that team and within that organization as a whole. Are we creating a place where everything is clear? And so we don't have to constantly be suspicious or constantly be trying to figure things out by ourselves? Or are we making things super clear for everybody with clear rules, guidelines, communication structures, collaboration structures, letting people, the idea of inclusivity is a big one. It's one that's, I know the word's demonized now, but it's just about not even your culture, but your learning style or your communication style. Do you like to process internally, and do you like time to think for yourself, versus do you like to talk out loud and brainstorm out loud? And that's how you get your ideas out. If you can come into a place where everybody sees that and recognizes that and creates space for that, that's a huge way of automatically feeling, okay, I'm at home. I don't have to have my guard up. I don't have to guess how much of myself to let be aware here. Or I can just be suspicious the whole time and just be like, how much of myself do I share? I don't really know. Do I have to fit in with this? But the more clarity you can provide it, and the more ability to create an environment where you're recognizing and acknowledging and bringing in all those different points of view and styles, that can help the process of building trust within the team and organization and with each other as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because when people feel safe, they're more productive. They're more willing to collaborate and communicate with each other. And so allowing that inclusivity where people feel safe without judgment to bring their full self to the table allows for that expansion. And I also want to ask around trust and relationship building in a hybrid environment. I have worked with bosses where they're like, if you're not in the seat, I don't trust you. I have to see you. Otherwise, I think you're off doing whatever you want on my dime. And that doesn't feel good because you're like, but don't you trust me? But I've also had bosses be like, I know you're going to get the work done. I know that you are good at your job. So how do we build trust and relationships when we're not necessarily like we are right now, like over Zoom? We don't have those water cooler moments. So how do you do that online?
Yeah. And as much as everybody loves the idea of remote work, and I do too. I love remote work. I love being able to work wherever I want to. It is those micro moments that really build relationship and trust, is that just saying hi in the morning to one another and saying how the weekend went, or what did you do with your family or your friends, or just that stuff, right? You don't have to become best friends and learn about each other's hopes and fears and dreams all to a deep level. But just knowing that stuff, knowing that you like going to concerts on the weekends in the summer, that's a big thing. Or in my town, we do Food Truck Friday. And so every week at town hall, they have food trucks and games and a band. And so it's a cool event. And so if I share that, then you know that. And that just breaks us a little bit closer, just hearing, oh, these are your experiences. But we won't share that in a meeting like this on Zoom, because unless we make explicit time for it, which is one of the recommendations, making explicit time for that sharing, then you and I don't know anything about it other than, do you do your work or not? Right. That's all we can know. And so that trust is really, in the hybrid environment, is really making time to create those bonds and figuring out, how do I get people to share and see that they have common ground over something? I always advise team leaders, when you do those kind of icebreaker questions, it's not about just trivia facts. It's not about facts you can just learn by reading somebody's Wikipedia page or a profile page. It's got to be something emotional, something they care about, so that they can see you also care about this, or you've had this good experience, or you've had this bad experience. I've also had a bad boss. You've had a bad boss. We talk about our worst bosses, or we talk about non-work wins. So we can talk about things we're passionate about. Those kind of things can help in replacement of being in person. Those things can also help build bonds in a more genuine, authentic way, rather than, again, just everybody share your favorite ice cream flavor.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And when we talk about the art of a difficult conversation, do you utilize a framework? Like I said, with EMC leadership, we talk about leading with impact versus feedback, because feedback says, you did this to me, and this is how I want you to change. Versus impact says, this is how this made me feel. So it's not necessarily about the person, but it's how it impacted you emotionally. And so what do you use a framework when you help leaders navigate through the art of difficult conversations?
Yeah. I like that, leading with impact. I think that's a cool way to phrase it and think about it. So I use a framework that I just created for myself that I use with people when I'm guiding them through. I call it the trust framework. It's really going through the letters of first T, thinking through the goals, because I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, is they don't understand what the goal or outcome of a conversation should be. And they think that venting is the goal of the conversation. I'm going to vent at you, and then I'm going to change your mind. Oh, that's not going to work. If you just yell at me for 30 minutes, and then you expect me to be happy about everything that's happened, I'm not going to be happy about that. So it's thinking through a realistic, concrete goal, simple goal that you can get through in the conversation, then reframing and rethinking some of the context so you can understand what are some of your biases that are impacting the situation, thinking objectively, and also reframing how you think about conflict so you're not so nervous about it. And then the U is understanding the context and the other person. So that's where we go through a lot of, what's the other person's style? How are they going to receive information? Are there things going on underneath the surface that you don't know about? Is there a power differential in terms of not just, hierarchical power, but also, are there gender, age, race differences that are playing a role here in how you're going to be perceived, how they're perceived, and things like that? So the role of power in those situations. And then we talk through strategies to navigate and manage hard behaviors of what might happen, as strategies to manage your own emotions. And then we go through the tactics, which are how do you actually lead a person through the conversation? And there's a way to do it that can be very healing and collaborative. And I always advise that the more you can make it a collaborative conversation and dialogue, the less the other person will be feeling defensive, and you can move them through the conversation as opposed to just constantly fighting them or going in a circles, or that you want to give them feedback about something and they bring up something else going on, right? Try to go on tangents. So that's the framework I generally try to bring people through, just to, as I help them think through a hard conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And again, with the process that I use within organizations, when we talk about reframing conflict, we talk about how conflict is never about the topic. It's about emotional disconnection and how there's no bad guy, right? Because when we get into conflict, we often seek to blame, judge, or shame the other person. We just get caught in this cycle, like we said before, of wanting to reach for that connection. And we're using these ineffective coping strategies, whether you withdraw or you pursue. And then you get caught in this negative cycle of trying to use those coping strategies, because at the end of the day, you both crave that connection. You both care about each other. And so I think it's helpful to have that reframing piece of, oh, this person that I'm in conflict with isn't the bad guy. We're just having a hard time connecting.
That's exactly it. I think it's about how do you stop thinking of the other person as a problem, but how do you align so you're both trying to solve the problem together?
I would love to get your perspective on when you were talking about the understanding piece, because I think a lot of times we go into conversations being like, you have to understand how I'm feeling, and you did this to me, and like all this stuff, instead of, like you said, understanding maybe the other person's perspective or how you impacted them. And so can you talk a little bit more about how to go into conversation using a framework of understanding?
Yeah, I think it's that opening your mind to what people's experiences are, because we have so many biases about the situation we only have our own perspective. And one example I give is when somebody cuts you off in traffic, is your first thought, they must have an emergency. They must be going somewhere important. Or is your first thought, what a jerk, they're terrible? Most of us feel that way. It's very hard for us to imagine somebody else's experiences all the time, but it's a good way to practice that. And it's really thinking through what's going on for them that they would behave like this. If they were assuming they're a rational, normal human being with regular wants, needs, desires, why would somebody do this behavior? And sometimes it's as easy as understanding what are their motivations in life and at work. If it's a work situation, what are their priorities? Is it their priority just their family, and this is really just a job for them, even in the nonprofit space? Sometimes it's just a job. They really just want to provide money so that they can spend time with their family and kids, and that's the most important thing in the world to them, and that's okay, right? But understanding that helps give context to this is why they're doing this, or this is why they don't seem to be giving above and beyond behavior, because that's not their priority. Understanding also, like, I had a guy that came up to me after a conference I was talking about difficult conversations, and his boss was a shorter Iranian woman, and he was a tall white guy. And so even though she was in a level of higher position than him, there's lots of different factors there that are playing underneath the surface that impact how she's viewing, and so how she thinks she might have to respond in these kind of situations, in these hard conversations, or how she feels like she might have to say certain things. And she came up to me because he wanted to have a good conversation, a good relationship, and needed to have that managing up conversation with her. But that was a new perspective he hadn't thought about, is that all these other factors underneath the surface that are playing. And so that helps him reframe, okay, now I understand that she might be feeling some sort of way about the way we look to each other. And so I need to think about how I'm going to come at it softer and more relaxed so that she can feel at ease and not on the defensive right away, even if she's starting the conversation.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that he had the courage to ask those questions and get curious about his boss's perspective. And I think a lot of nonprofits this year, I wouldn't say are necessarily struggling, but some have lost funding, and they are tasked with turning things around and making money appear out of nowhere. I like to keep my magic wand in my back pocket. What's your advice for having those early conversations that set the tone? Because I don't think it happens once crisis happens, right? Like but that's often when it comes is, oh, this is happening and we're not prepared. So how can organizations start to have those difficult conversations early on to prepare them for when that crisis hits?
It's transparency is the first place to start, is letting people know. Because I think if you're leading a team, nobody's totally disconnected from the news. A lot of people are watching the news less, but everybody's aware of what's going on. People know that we're losing funding. The federal government is downsizing, so lots of people are entering the workforce. There's layoffs in the private sector as well, and the nonprofit sector. And so it's just a bad environment all around. And so I think it's okay and worth it to be transparent and recognize that and start guiding the conversation. I think a lot of leaders are worried about what the reaction is going to be. Not only are they worried about what the reaction is going to be, but they're worried that it's going to be so emotionally intense that they're not going to be able to manage those reactions. And they also think that they have to help everybody feel better and happy about the situation. You can't. That's not your job to make everybody feel happy in that situation. What you can do is help everybody at least understand that you care for them and that you want to help them in the best way possible. And that you're going to walk through this process together. And the only way to do that is to be transparent. You have to be transparent and listen and recognize that you won't have all the answers. And they know that there are no easy answers. I think we all recognize there's no easy answers. If there were, then somebody would have solved it already and told everybody else how to solve that problem. So it's that transparency and being willing to share, like, hey, we're going through some difficult times. This is what we're trying. And we might not be able to solve these problems. And we might have to think about either downsizing, we might have to think about reorganization, we might have to think about mergers or combining forces with other nonprofits. And those are all real conversations. And I don't know what that means for us. I don't know what that means for me. I don't know what that means for all of our jobs. But I want us to keep talking about this. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of power in treating your employees as adults and letting them in on the situation and recognizing that everybody's nervous, everybody's feeling anxious in some sort of way about this. So involve them in the process.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today. Yeah, I love that. And I think an important part of leadership is being okay with not knowing all the answers, right? We're so quick to be like, oh, we know everything or make up an answer. But honestly, people can tell when you're bullshitting an answer. Sorry for my language. But I think it is important to have that humility and be like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here with you. And we're in this together.
Yep. I remember one story I always use is, I can't remember the guy's name exactly. It was like Andrew Moorfield or something, but he started an online bank in London in like early 2000s. And the first, I think maybe 9 months in, they were struggling. He had a team of 50 or 60 people and they were struggling and he couldn't make payroll. He had to lay off a third of his workforce, but they had been so close because it was like 50, 60 people. They worked together every day. So he actually brought them into their meeting room and said, listen, here's the reality. This is our payroll, whatever this number is. This is our revenue, and it's lower number than this number. And so I don't want to do any layoffs because I care about all of you. I hate the idea of having to let people go. And he showed them these numbers. I have to either lay off a third of you or I have to do pay cuts for everybody. And so they actually had him leave the room and they're like, let us discuss this and think about this. And we'll come back to you and tell you what we think. So when they brought him back in, a third of them had decided we're actually going to work here without pay because we believe that you can turn things around for us. And so a third of them actually voluntarily decided not to work there without pay for whatever amount of months. And it was actually the younger people, the younger unmarried people, because as a group, they had discussed that, hey, these older folks, they technically have more security, but also they have kids, they have a mortgage. We can all move back in with our parents. We can roommate with friends. We can stick it out a little bit. We don't stress as much. We don't have as much responsibility to pay for. And he was able to turn things around and they were able to solve it and move things forward. And they've grown to an international banking organization now. I always love that story. I always give that example because how many leaders are going to go to their entire organization and say, here are the numbers that we're struggling with that we can't seem to reconcile. That takes a lot of trust and a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah. And when you're talking about, he could have just gone in there and been like, hey, you're fired. Instead, he brought them into the conversation and they were able to have that buy-in into how it was going. When change is happening, I found that there can be rumors or gossip when there isn't transparent communication. So how can leaders get ahead or address the rumor mill that is inevitable when it comes to change?
I actually love my old boss's way of doing this. She, at the end of every staff meeting, she would say, are there any rumors, gossip, concerns that people are hearing that you want me to address? Sometimes people would have stuff and she would share as much as she could, knowing that you can't always share every single thing. But I always liked that approach because it was just a normal part of our routine is, let me just address any gossip, any rumors right now. And let me see if I can share what I can share, or if I can get more information, I'll answer at our next meeting. And that was always a cool way to just hear what was going on.
Yeah, I think that's so important. As we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about your own podcast, The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, which blends both the emotional and strategic aspects of communication. Tell us a little bit more about what led you to start this podcast and some of the most impactful conversations that you've had.
I'll be really truthful. I originally started it as a marketing tool for my online course around difficult conversations, but I got stuck pretty quick because I was like, well, what else can I really cover on this podcast? But when my co-host came on, when I met my co-host, she also wanted to do something like that. And together we realized there's a lot of value if we just make this a podcast and provide it for free, and it allows us to really talk through a lot of these things in public. And so that's how it started. And that's what's helped it grow and continue to do that, is because we're just focused on how do we approach all these different conversations in all areas of life. So we've been able to do professional things like layoffs, how to do managing up, leading change, working with high performers that suddenly aren't high performing anymore, but also personal things like sex and intimacy in relationships, marriages that are falling apart, politics in personal and professional life, how to talk about those things, how to be courageous and how to just overcome that self-doubt. And so I think we've been excited about that. And this year we're starting to incorporate more internal leaders and some of the conversations they've had to manage. And we've already started recording a bunch of them. It's been really cool to hear how different executive directors have turned things around in their relationships with board members, or hearing a hostage negotiator talk about how to not be silenced as a leader, how to not be silent in these kind of crisis moments, how to start rebuilding trust in your organization when things are happening like this, and managing up and things like that. And so we're excited to be able to showcase how other people are doing difficult conversations, not just us, and also talk about how it's interesting, even across industry, across experiences, people are using the same skill sets, even if they don't always know that they're using that skill set, but they're able to still blend the idea of how do I be emotionally in control and in touch, but also there are things I need to say or do, and this is how I said them, and this is how other people can say them.
That's good. I can't wait to tune in. And if anyone is listening to this and they're at the end of this podcast and they're like, okay, I've listened to this and now I need to go have that hard conversation, what is one lasting piece of advice that you would give them to have the courage to go do so?
Can I give two?
Sure.
One, I would say number one is write down what your goal of the conversation is. And it's got to be simple, it's got to be concrete, and it's got to be observable, as in everybody knows that this is the end result of this conversation. That'll solve most of your problems. If you can write that down and just keep it, with you as you have that conversation. I'd say the second thing is find ways to ground yourself and use coping skills before and during and after. So whether it's deep breathing, whether it's mindfulness, yoga, going for a bike ride, having dinner with friends, find ways to take care of yourself, because hard conversations are just hard no matter what. And it's okay that they're hard. So just take care of yourself and realize that it's all emotional. It's hard for everybody.
So good. Well, if people want to find you and the work that you do, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn, and you can find my podcast. On LinkedIn, I'm Chris Wong, LMHC. That's how I differentiate myself, because I have such a common name. And my podcast, The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, on all platforms. You can catch us everywhere. And then my website, myleadershippotential.com. Come check me out. Check out the work I do. I have a lot of free resources on there as well. So you can come there and get some stuff to help you in your work.
Well, we will make sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Chris, for being on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation.
Hey, before you go, want to watch? Yes, watch the best moments from the Lead with Heart episodes? We're sharing the most powerful highlights and takeaways over on our brand new YouTube channel. Yes, we are on YouTube. Just search for The Savvy Fundraiser on YouTube and hit subscribe so you never miss a moment of insight and inspiration. The link is in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep leading with heart.